Testing, testing.
No, Stan's gone again. But so we're all okay with talking to Frank again to clarify this thing, right?
I'd like to very much.
Yeah.
It's all about communication.
Yes.
Okay, then the east, the west, like, we need to turn it.
Just when you're done, move it out of the way for the kids, so they have. Okay. Right there.
Oh.
I was told we weren't doing anything east.
Where do you want?
On the opening, I don't know. Are we doing on the opening? Okay. Sorry, that was my mistake. I didn't know that they were doing it. They.
I'm sorry, I was told it was
Number 3.
I'll leave it on.
Nobody knows what's going on. This is the problem. This is a big problem for
Yes.
me. Nobody knows what's going on.
Yes. Sorry, that was my mistake, Dave. I didn't know that they were playing on it.
I can't depend on you to know everything.
Yeah.
Because you're not getting paid.
Yeah.
And I can't chew you out.
Good.
I can only
Well,
love
we're gonna try to.
Okay. Okay.
Oh, we're starting with new soul. Okay. You would have known it. Yep.
I'm a new soul. I came to this strange world hoping I could learn a bit about how to give and take. But since I came here, felt the joy and the fear, finding myself making every possible mistake. La 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 la. La 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 la. See, I'm a young soul in this very strange world, hoping I could learn a bit about what it's true and fake. But why all this hate? Try to communicate. Finding trust and love is not always easy to make. La 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 la. La 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 la. This is a happy end, 'cause you don't understand everything you have done. Why is everything so wrong? This is a happy end. Come and give me your hand. I'll take you far away. I'm a new soul. I came to this strange world hoping I could learn came here, felt the joy and the fear, finding myself making every possible mistake. So in this very strange world, every possible mistake, possible mistake.
Good morning and welcome to the First Unitarian Church of Omaha. It is good to be here, good to be together with friends that we already know and new people as well. We begin this morning with a special treat. We have a story for all ages by our own Suzanne Arney. Oh yes. Children, come forward if you will. Those of us who will pretend you're children, you can do that as well.
I'm Suzanne Arney, and I'm here to tell you about a very special visitor who came to my house last Wednesday. I didn't see him, but I found treats and little coins and presents in my shoes. What? You'll see. Outside my door there was a nibbled carrot and some dropped chocolates and nuts. Who could it have been? You think it was an elf, huh? How many of you celebrate Christmas? Do you celebrate Christmas? Most of you? That's fun. That's nice. Traditions. Families all over the world celebrate Christmas, and sometimes in ways that seem very different, but really they're all connected. In the United States, on December 25th, Santa Claus comes in a flying sleigh pulled by 8 tiny reindeer. But in Belgium, a small country in Europe, where my mother comes from, St. Nicholas visits houses on December 6th, leaving gifts carried by his little donkey. St. Nicholas was a bishop. This is kind of a wizard, St. Nicholas. But this is St. Nicholas, and he wears a red suit and a special bishop's hat called a mitre. And you can see that Santa Claus is the American version of St. Nicholas. Santa Claus wears a red suit, and he has a pointy hat that's kind of flipped over like a stocking cap. What happens when you say St. Nicholas fast 3 times? St. Nicholas, St. Nicholas, Santa Claus. Try it. Santa Claus. Kind of, but it kind of turns into Santa Claus, doesn't it? When I was your age, I loved to celebrate St. Nicholas Day, and I still do. Every year on December 6th, my family comes to my house for a party, and one of my favorite preparations is setting out my collection of St. Nicholases. I have a lot of them. I also like, and that's one of them, I also enjoy setting the table with Belgian chocolates and cookies. And when everybody has arrived, when everybody has come, we sing a Nicholas carol in French, inviting St. Nicholas to come join us. That's what I was playing when you came up to sit down. And I'd like you to join in and sing it with me. At least the part that says, Venez, venez, Saint Nicolas, which means come and join our party. Should we try it? Okay. See if I can work my... Get ready. Okay, I did it. That is not a little elf. Thank you. That is St. Nicholas. But he's like a little elf. Well, look, many of these St. Nicholas figures hold 3 little gold balls. You see that? Would you like to pass it around? If you're real careful, you can look at him. And there's always money on the table, so that each guest can take at least 2 coins, one for himself and one to share. This is a way of honoring St. Nicholas's generosity. A story is told of a night when Nicholas walked through his city and heard crying coming from a little house. When he came closer, he saw a man and his 3 daughters. They were so poor that they had decided that one of the girls would have to be sold as a slave so that the other 2 girls would have money to get married. Nicholas hurried home, but when everybody was asleep that night, he came back to that sad house and he threw gold coins down the chimney. And they landed in a pair of shoes that were drying by the fireplace. And he came back the next 2 nights and did the same thing. And the girls, all 3 girls had enough money to get married, and the father had enough money to pay his debts. And now you know where Christmas stockings come from. And I brought money from my table to share with you, and you can pass that around and take some to keep and some to share. And that's how Nicholas stays alive, through you and me. So happy St. Nicholas Day. Au revoir. Au revoir.
Who wants to come up with Brent and Dave and light the shells?
Sure.
At times our own light goes out and is rekindled by a spark from another person. Each of us has cause to think with deep gratitude of those who have lighted a candle within us.
Go now in peace, go now in peace. May the spirit of love
Thank you. I'm Nadine Keith. I'm the worship associate this morning. We welcome all of you, and particularly visitors. And if you will join us downstairs for coffee hour after service, we invite you to take a blue cup so that we'll recognize you as a visitor and give you a particularly warm welcome. Would you all please sign in on the pink sheets at the end of the pews so we have a record of who's here and, more importantly, helps us know who isn't. I also would remind you that parking is free in the parking garage to the west of the parking lot, but you do need to remember to have your parking ticket validated downstairs in the common room. The hospitality team this morning, the ones who are greeting you and are here to answer your questions, are the friendly faces. And if you have any questions, be sure to ask. You have a lot of announcements in your order of service. I would call a couple to your attention. One is the mitten tree here, our lovely mitten tree tradition. And we ask that you bring mittens, gloves, hats, scarves, and socks to decorate this tree during the month of December, and they will be given to the needy in our community. Also, the Women's Alliance has taken on a project of collecting things for the Women's Center for Advancement. That announcement is in your order of service, and you can see the kinds of items that they particularly need. And lastly, I want to call your attention to this window, which is behind the organ. You all have been aware through the months of our window replacement project, and the first window is finished. And isn't that lovely? So Dean Christensen asked me to ask you to come up and inspect it after the service. Our membership moment this morning will be given by Sharon Peeler.
Good morning. I'm so pleased to have been asked to share some of my thoughts with you. The Urban Dictionary describes safe haven as that place you go to get away from the perceived lunacy of the world. This is largely what I was searching for when I walked through the door here 19 months ago. That and a sense of family, friends, belonging, a place to be on holidays, a support system, and caring people to share this amazing weekly experience with, to learn, celebrate, and grieve together. This is a place where I can come to hear inspirational messages, make new friends, and challenge myself, all without judgment or the negative leftovers from past religious experience. We are truly a tribe here. We're a large extended family gathered around the holiday table. We agree and disagree, show our emotions, and share our thoughts and beliefs without much judgment. Sometimes we go away happy. Sometimes we go away with a lot to think about. We may all have different belief systems, but at the end of the day, we all belong to the same caring tribe. We move forward together with common goals, work to enact change, and we all try our hardest to make this world just a little bit better. This is what I was searching for and what I found here. When I attended my first service here, I was absolutely amazed. Readings from Rumi and Tagore and achingly beautiful music. I snapped a picture of the bulletin and sent it to a friend of mine. He replied, "Who would have dreamed such a place existed?" My thoughts were the same. I had struck spiritual gold. I'm still in a phase of wonderment here. I rarely leave on any Sunday without plenty to think about and the feeling that I know I'm here for the right reason. My membership here is truly rewarding, and I cherish every minute of it. And I thank all of you for welcoming me into your tribe.
Great. It's now time for the morning offering. And the Share the Plate beneficiary for this month is Community Meals. And the Change for Change beneficiary is the neighborhood ministry team, where we provide for needs of people who come to the door of this church.
Nobody home, meat, no drink, no money have I none. Let shall be merry. Hey ho, nobody home. 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 So cake. Please, good missus, a soul cake. Apple, a pear, and a plum, and a cherry. Any good thing to make us all merry. 1 for Peter, 2 for Paul, 3 for him who made us all. God bless the master of this house and the mistress also, and all the little children that round your table grow. The cattle in your stable, the dog by your front door, and all that dwells within your gates, we wish you 10 times more. Soul cake. Please, good missus, a soul cake. Apple, a pear, and a plum, and a cherry. Any good thing to make us all merry. 1 for Peter, 2 for Paul, 3 for him who made us all. Go down into the cellar and see what you can find. If the barrels are not empty, we hope you will be kind. We hope you will be kind with your apple and straw beer, for we'll come this time next year. Soul cake. Please, good missus, a soul cake. Apple, a pear, and a plum, and a cherry. Any good thing to make us all merry. 1 for Peter, 2 for Paul, 3 for him who made us all. Streets are very dirty, my shoes are very thin. I have a little pocket to put a penny in. If you haven't got a penny, a halfpenny will do. If you haven't got a halfpenny, then God bless you. Soul cake. Please, good missus, a soul cake. Apple, a pear, and a plum, and a cherry. Any good thing to make us all merry. 1 for Peter, 2 for Paul, 3 for him who made us all. Soul cake. Please, good missus, a soul cake. Apple, a pear, and a plum, and a cherry. Any good thing to make us all merry. 1 for Peter, 2 for Paul, 3 for him who made us all. 3 for him who made us all.
This reading is a tale from 14th century Persia. Of course, things like that can happen. Once God made love to a great saint who had a hairy belly. Of course, things like that can happen. And it was a surprise only to the novice on the path when the saint's stomach began to swell, just like a woman's. Weeks went by, then months. The saint's cheeks turned into beautiful roses. He became like a young bride who was carrying a holy child, and his gratitude was speechless, but his eyes shone like 2 planets making love. The town began to stand outside his house at night, for it had come to the attention of the faithful that as the moon passed by on its round, it would sometimes bend over and kiss the roof. Of course, things like that can happen. A few days before the delivery of God's baby, the saint had to visit a city close by where few knew him. He was walking unnoticed past a mosque, and the shouts of God's lovers happened to fill the air, calling, "Allah, Allah, where are you? Where are you, beautiful one?" And the child in the womb of the Master could not remain silent and shouted back in an astounding voice, I am here, dear world." The crowd in the mosque became frantic, and they picked up shoes, clubs, and stones. You know what happened then. The story becomes grim. But the moon cannot hold a grudge. It still stops by some nights and leans over this gentle earth as over a crib and gives a full, wet kiss. For the moon knows that God is always amorous. He will never stop making love, for the truth has been divinely conceived deep within each of us.
Well, that's a hard act to follow. But before we go into our moment of silence, I wanted to share from the Gospel of John Lennon. The words are, "War is over if you want it." We are the ones who create war. We are the ones who can end war. War is over if you want it. War is over now. We enter a moment of silence.
Turn around, look at what you see in her face, the mirror of your dreams. Make believe I'm everywhere, given in the light, and written on the pages is the answer to a never-ending story. Never-ending story. Reach the stars, fly a fantasy, dream a dream, and you see will be.
Crimes that keep their secrets will unfold behind the clouds, and there upon a rainbow is the answer to a never-ending story.
Show no fear, just let me fade away. In your hands, the birth of a new day.
Crimes that keep their secrets will unfold behind the clouds, and there upon a rainbow is the answer to a never-ending story. Never-ending story. Never-ending story. Never-ending story.
There you go. Good job.
The ancients were more aware than we are of the changes in light, the darkness that happens this time of the year and the cold that happens. And of course, it's because they didn't have central heating and they didn't have light that can be relied on without burning things down. And this week, the ghost of Jack Perry came and reminded me that they also didn't have central plumbing, which was the most important thing that ever happened in civilization. Not only were they aware of these changes outside of us, but more than us, they were aware of what happens inside as these changes happen, that we become more inner, more contemplative. Excuse me. And this is because they also didn't have electronic devices around to read all the time. And so for them, the moment of solstice was an extraordinarily important moment. It was the moment at which the sun stopped going further and further to the south. The days became shorter and the nights became longer. And instead, the sun slowly started rising from the south, and the days became longer and warmer once again. And it's not a mistake that early Christians used the same time to talk about the story of the birth. Actually, the story of the birth started about the 4th century, not at the very beginning. But we are pretty sure it didn't happen around this time of the year. It was a symbolic action that happened. And there are several reasons why it might have happened. It may have happened that they co-opted Saturnalia, which was a Roman feast at about this time, a feast that was kind of raucous and more like Mardi Gras these days. And of course, it would be great for a church to co-opt something like that. They may have co-opted the birthday of Mithra, which was the day of the unconquerable sun. Again, because of the symbolism, because darkness becomes light. And it's also possible that they just took the darkness and light metaphors from the Bible and said, this is the time of year to do it. But we really don't have to choose. The fact is that these things are overdetermined, and probably it was all these things together and more that caused them to say, this is the time of the year when we're going to celebrate this important change. Now, Christmas didn't start on its own. By the 5th century, Advent, which is the season we're now in, the season that precedes Christmas, was already as important as, if not more important, than the birth story itself. Advent was the real key here. And so it was in this period of increased darkness and cold that we are called to let it in, to let in the darkness and cold, to let go of all of our previous notions of what the world was like and to be ready for a major transformation, for a paradigm shift, for a whole new way of looking at the world. And this new way of looking at the world is something that I've discussed a couple of weeks ago. I mentioned John Holt, an historian, who talked about an important change in humankind and the entire race that happened between the 8th and the 3rd centuries before the Common Era. It was at that time, not just in the Middle East and not just in Europe, but around the world that there became a change in consciousness. Suddenly, people were no longer limited to seeing the world as it is, but they also began to see the world as it ought to be. They recognized the distinction between this mess that we've created for ourselves, these wars, these struggles we have with one another, and they began to see the possibility of a different life, a different world, where people are treated justly and fairly. And in some ways, the paradigm shift that happened around this time with the birth story begins to explain what this paradigm shift is all about and begins to explain how it is that we can at least move toward uniting these two conflicting ideas of the way the world is and the way the world ought to be. There are 3 main components to the paradigm shift, the thing that begins with the birth story at Christmas. The first one is incarnation, and that's huge. Until this time, the ancients always believed that the holy was somewhere out there. It was either in the heavens in some place that nobody could point to, or it was in a particular temple where there was holiness, but that it was separate from us. It was outside of us. The incarnation story is a story of moving the holy from outside to within us. Suddenly the holy is not some nebulous thing that lives in a temple or lives out in the sky somewhere. Somehow, in the incarnation story, the holy walks among us and the holy is within us. This is really a radical shift. And I want to point out that it's such a major shift that here we are 2,000 years later and people are still thinking the other way. They're still thinking that the holy's out there somewhere. It's a hard concept to get through our heads. It's not out there. It's within. That was the paradigm shift, and it was huge. The second part of the paradigm shift is that it's not just the holy that's within us and not outside of us, but it's the destructive that's within us and among us and not somewhere out there. In ancient times, before this big paradigm shift, people had always attributed evil to demons, first of all, demons who were around us but we couldn't see them, or to the other tribe. They're the ones who do evil, we're the ones who do good. But with this paradigm shift that happened about 2,000 years ago, we recognize that everyone has evil within us. The words of Jesus were that don't worry about the mote in somebody else's eye. Take care of the beam in your own eye first. We all have the destructive within us. And now the third part of this paradigm shift. We have the holy within us, and we have the destructive within us. The question is, how do we recognize these parts of ourselves, and how do we manage them? How do we live in a world knowing that we have the creative and holy and the destructive and the separating all within us? And the answer, again, was pointed to by Jesus in the last words of the Gospel of Luke. The Lucan Gospel is the one that has the beautiful birth story we read on Christmas Eve. But the last words of Jesus, according to that Gospel, were, Father, forgive them, because they know not what they do. We, for the most part, have no idea why we're doing things. For the most part, even now, centuries later, we make decisions in our lives without any real awareness of where those decisions come from. And what we are called to do is to own the parts of ourselves, own the holy and the destructive, recognize where our decisions come from, and be able, through that, to make better and better decisions. This is what the Gospel of John Lennon was all about. War is over if you want it. We're the ones who create destructiveness. We're the ones who separate people from people. We divide the world into us and them. That's not going to change from outside. There's no one outside who can change it. It's we who can change it. Only we can bring about peace in this world. And this, too, is still difficult to get in our time. All three of these things, the incarnation story, the realization that evil is within us and not somewhere else, and mindfulness, all of this is still hard to understand, which is why we still talk about it 2,000 years ago, 2,000 years later. And it's the center, the core of every religious tradition. In Advent, in this period of time, in our own culture, we tend to talk about the birth story from the Bible. But the fact is, these concepts are found in every religion, in Taoism, in Buddhism, in Islam, in Judaism, in all the world's religions. The 14th century poem that you heard this morning from Hafez was written from in the Islamic tradition. And I should point out that Hafez is treated like a great prophet in what's now called Iran. It used to be called Persia. One of the great prophets of the religion. There are shrines to this man. This is a holy man, and these are holy words. And he says essentially the same thing deliberately as the Christian Bible says about the birth of Jesus, except, of course, he has a man, not a woman, giving birth, but still giving birth to the holy. And he points out, as is true, people are afraid of this. People crucified Jesus, too. People are afraid of seeing the holy within ourselves. They're afraid of seeing the evil within ourselves, the destructiveness within ourselves. And yet, and this is the great thing about the poem and about all Scripture, of all religions, and yet there is that within us that continues to be willing to start all over. This belief we have, this vision we have of the world as it should be is so strong, so much a part of us that we, whatever happens, we don't let go of it. The poem, you only heard part of it, but the poem ends, "The moon cannot hold a grudge. It still stops by some nights and leans over this gentle earth as over a crib and gives a full, wet kiss. For the moon knows that God is always amorous and will never stop making love. For the truth has been divinely conceived deeply within each of us. That's exactly what we're talking about. The truth has been divinely conceived within each of us. We don't need these ancient stories, any of them. We know the truth. It's absolutely within us. There is, in fact, so much I don't like about Christmas, and probably you don't like about Christmas either. I don't know. It certainly has excesses, to say the least. It certainly is materialistic as we celebrate it, not just a few pennies to give away to kids, but there's a lot of materialism going on. But there's also so much that has value about this season. I think of the birth story, the narrative. It's extraordinarily beautiful. It speaks to each of us as each birth speaks to us, as each birth is a miracle. And I think of the Christmas Eve service we have here each Christmas Eve. It always ends with all the lights going out and people holding candles and singing together, Silent Night, Holy Night. It really is a holiness, an expression of holiness that stays with me. And I think about Advent, this time of preparation, this time of living into the darkness, of finding the stillness within, letting go of all the superficial things that we think we believe in, so that the real truth, the important truth, can come in. May we approach Christmas this year in the spirit of mindfulness. May we experience, at least for a moment, that war is over if we want it. Not just the wars with weapons, but the wars that we create with political difference and with color differences and with other differences. All those wars are over if we want it. The wars we create within ourselves, they too are over if we want it. May we affirm that there is a force deep within us, in each of us, that never stops making love. Whatever happens, whatever we lose, still there is the force of love that just won't stop. And may we envision once again an earth made fair and all her people one. Please join me in the closing hymn, number 113. In the stillness of winter, may we rediscover the truth that leads us from death to life, from falsehood to truth, from despair to hope, from fear to trust, from hate to love, and from war to peace. May peace fill our hearts, our nation, our world.
Strange world, hoping I could learn a bit about how to give and take. But since I came here, felt the joy and the fear, finding myself making every possible mistake. La 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 la. Very strange.